Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, UMAC community. Welcome to this episode of the Beirut series. And today we have a very, very special guest. We have Peter Keller, the Director General of ICOM. And I'm grateful, Peter, for being here in this forum of university museums online, because we are also all online nowadays. But thank you so much for giving us the time and the opportunity to exchange some ideas about Beirut, and not only Beirut. We will talk about other things.
Thank you for the invitation and giving me the opportunity to speak. The pandemic in spring, and for some countries since then, without interruption, and for other countries in a second wave now. The pandemic has changed the situation of museums completely, and it came along, if I may say, nevertheless, with disasters, with catastrophes, with situations of conflict which were already there before and which were...
Yeah, because that goes on, huh? That continues. It's kind of...
That's the case of Beirut, that's the case of Africa, and the situation is more difficult, certainly, because of the pandemic, but it was already difficult before.
It was already difficult, of course. And perhaps the first thing, for people who don't know you, perhaps even before we start talking about Beirut and museums and the concerns of museums, I think it would be very nice if you could say a few words, introduce yourself, you know, how did you enter the museum world? How did you get, which circumstances brought you to where you are now, you know, Director General of the International Council of Museums, the largest network of museum professionals and museums in the world. Tell us a little bit about you, Peter.
Well, it's not only the largest, but also the only global association of museums, with 49,000 members in almost 140 countries and territories. So well represented on the global scale, with differences, of course, in regional representation in Africa, Asia, America, and Europe, but nevertheless, always with this idea of an international network cooperating. And I entered this network about 15 years ago. I was then director of a museum in Austria. I had already worked in museums before in Berlin and Germany, studied museology in Paris and art history in Germany. And
you're from Germany.
I'm German, yeah. But I spent most of my professional career in Austria. And became member of the national committee there, of an international committee, Dommuseum, because my museum was in a historic building, in a cathedral. And there you have particular challenges running a museum regarding conservation.
Very diverse collections, the building,
we had textiles, silverware, paintings, everything you can imagine, and the building as an object as well, which was great because it's right in the center of town, Baroque building. And we integrated in a 7-year project our museum in a cluster of 4 museums, a development project which multiplied visitor numbers and made the structure, I think, sustainable, more sustainable, because it's after all, it's easier with a bigger structure, because if you negotiate with partners in tourism or others, it's good that you have
you have power,
a basis. You're at a different scale. And
which is the name of your museum? Because we will put here in the description below.
The Cathedral Museum, Dommuseum.
Okay.
And it's right in the center of town. So it's easy to find.
It's easy to find.
But inside the building, it's difficult because it's a historic building and not easy to find your way through it. But that's a challenge and an opportunity as well, because you have the fantastic views and all this experience of the building, which comes with it, and which I liked very much, because it's far beyond presenting a collection, presenting a work in its context. historical context with many.
You're an historian by training, Peter.
Art historian.
Art historian.
But I worked in, studied also languages and literature and history and ecclesiastical history. So wide range of topics which you can bring together in such a position. I think that's what's great about museums in the end.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I think
all the disciplines that are required, all the praxis, and of all the.
And the many aspects you have in your everyday work in a museum. Of course, you're in charge of a collection. You're managing a collection. You're running, developing exhibitions. Conservation measures and all this is very varied, let's say, and many aspects in it. This changed a lot when I became Director General of ICOM. 4 years ago.
Because you stopped being concerned with the micro, even networks, micro networks, and at national scale, and you became. I was a
member of the board of the National Committee and Secretary and President of the International Committee. I was member of several juries or advisory boards, but nevertheless I worked in a museum and left this practice.
You felt anchored, at the end of the day you would have to go back to your museum, to your staff, to your team, but being in Paris changed everything, right?
You work with a team as well. But of course it's a different team and it's a different job. It's more administrative, of course, because I'm head of the
managing, organizing. And
it's a very complex structure with all its national committees, international committees, regional alliances, it. And in particular, under the conditions of COVID again, not meeting, communicating online, which is good. We have a lot of meetings online now.
That's very good.
It's kind of forces because you don't have to travel.
More sustainable for the environment and so on and so on and so on. But at the same time, the fact there's been, UMAC feels it. There's been a decline in members because people, right? They feel.
I think the decline comes from the pandemic because people
are
do
staying
their
home.
Jobs. Museums are closed. We can speak about it in detail later, but because we see it from our surveys we did in April and September. But I must also say I'm really waiting for our first physical meeting again, because it's good to be online, but it's better to meet in person.
Much more. You cannot compare.
There are many things you communicate very differently in person than online.
Absolutely. And even for museums individually, I mean, come on. It's all about first-hand experience with objects. So this digital thing, I mean, it's very good for access and so on, but at the same time, it's a double sword. I don't know, it's two faces of the same. It can be tricky and dangerous even for us.
Oh, I spoke about it 2 days ago in an online conference because, of course, everybody speaks about online activities of museums now, and it's good to be visible and keep contact with your communities. But a museum is very much about objects, after all, which means about authenticity. This object
encounters. It's about encounters between people and
experience, experience of an object, of a space, of persons.
Yes.
And these encounters, they're different online. So
but the thing is, even in families, we're detached from our families. We cannot visit our grandfathers, grandparents. You cannot. So this detachment, it's not only that is felt by the society. It's not only a problem for museums. It's
personally, I think, when I traveled a while ago on the train, I wore a mask. Of course, everybody had a mask, and there was a small child, 1 year old. And it looked at me and I looked back and smiled, and I thought, this child will never have seen somebody smiling in his very young age. And I'm wondering what this will do to society. I think we still do not imagine the consequences of all this on a social level. Not speaking about all the deaths in Italy, for example, where northern Italy was extremely hit. And
now the south also. But it's not only, it now bring us back to universities and university museums. Imagine if you are 18, okay? Imagine if you were back 18 and your first day, your first year in the university, and you were told to go home back to your parents because you cannot be in the campus, you cannot have those experiences that you have. It's not only children. Imagine, it's this generation of young people who are deprived for at least 1 year, and we don't know if more, we'll see, of all the experiences. It's completely irreplaceable. You cannot really replace that.
Well, I saw a survey a few weeks ago from a university asking the students if they want to spend the next year working remotely or if they want to return to university. And of course, 60-70% wanted to return because... Of course. You learn differently, you live differently. So,
you have different things. It's all about, it's also about experiences, you know, with colleagues, making friends forever. They'll be your friends forever, you know, it's incredible. Okay, but well, thank you for this introduction. Fantastic. We get to learn more about you, because sometimes we don't know about people, you know, they stay there and they do their job, but who are they, you know? I'm curious about people. But anyway, so back to Beirut. You were there recently. Well, not so recently. Some time ago, almost 1 month ago. I don't remember exactly when you were. But first of all, what was your first impression when you got there? There was no confinement lockdown, huh? Total.
No.
People could,
and we could move. We went there 2 months ago, I think, when the project was launched. To launch it, in fact, with Alif, the foundation that funded the measures.
We will put the links below. Will put the links below. Okay.
Thank you. With Elsa, who is working on the project, and
ICOM Lebanon.
Of course, and the museums. Maybe we can speak about the museums later in detail. But my first impression, I was very much impressed by the professional and the commitment of the colleagues in Lebanon. I never went to Lebanon before, I must say, because ICOM has 120 national committees. If I saw every committee every year once, I would live on a plane.
Yeah, I know.
They have the professionals. They have, of course, the universities, the education. They have not necessarily, especially in this situation now, the material, because they need, of course, a lot of material which you have to bring in. But they are very committed, especially there's a young generation, not only museum people, also architects or so, which help us.
The volunteers, they're incredible. They're incredible.
And help the museums. And this commitment is really impressive to see how they work and live and fight for their cultural heritage.
For the future, in a way. It's in a country where so many, again, like you said, you know, wars, ravaged by wars and economic distress and unemployment and so on. And now you have an explosion. And the force that comes from within those young, especially the young people, but also, of course, Susie, the chair of ICOM. I was very, very impressed. I was never in Beirut. I want to go there as soon as I can.
Well, but this was my second impression, so to say, because when you then go to the museums and go through the city center, the civil war was 20 years ago, almost 30 years ago it ended.
30 years ago.
And the situation didn't change that much since then, because of course part of the town was rebuilt on the sea, and also the central part of it, new buildings inside old buildings, or old buildings replaced by new ones, and a lot of investments, of course,
were made.
And at the same time, you see still many houses which are still damaged and where nothing happened, which are where you just see the facade and inside it's empty. And well, I remember from Germany when I grew up, there were houses like that still, but
of course.
There you got the impression that it didn't change that much since the Civil War.
You mean for ruins from the war, not ruins
ruins
from
from the war. ruins from the war. You see the traces of the guns and
the bullets and the
bullets,
bombs
and it's still there quite a lot. And then the economic crisis came a year ago, I think it started.
Yeah.
And the upheavals last year, and then the explosion in the harbor. I think it was just the last drop, so to say. But it's a long history, which makes the situation more complicated and more difficult.
Yeah, yeah. You know, Peter, my impression is that from my very rarefied interaction with them, is that precisely because they think that the government is inexistent or dysfunctional, the society mobilizes in a way that probably they wouldn't in other places where the public services work, the health system works, the education system works, the repair infrastructure works. So they kind of mobilize precisely because there's a void. And so they,
but it's, of course, there's a void that they fill, but there is also this identification with the country, with the heritage.
The heritage, the identity.
Which is very important, I think, a reason for this commitment too.
Yeah, it's incredible. I also felt that. But and now what is the ICOM is participating in the international effort, and what is in your view, your main challenge at this point?
Well, now I think with regard to Lebanon, we made contact between the museums. I think Elsa presented them a while ago to you. Musée sur Soc and the Museum of Prehistory.
Yeah.
And we made contact between the colleagues and Alif, which can give money to support the museums. And actually the works are ongoing in Sur Soc.
Yeah.
They have to replace windows, doors, stabilize. Of course, there were some pieces damaged of the collection, not many seen the explosion, but nevertheless. The Prehistory Museum has signed a contract, so they will start the work soon.
Yes, that's a university, one of the university.
Yeah, one of the university museums. It's Saint-Joseph, I think.
Saint-Joseph.
And there the work will start soon. The Palais sur Soc, the villa of the family in front of the museum. It was one of the most hit buildings I saw because, Beirut is on hills.
Yeah.
And of course, the side of the hill turned to the harbor was hit, and the other side not that much.
The other side not so much.
And the Sur Soc Museum is looking down to the harbor at 500 meters maybe. So the windows were broken, the roofs were destroyed. The tapestries and paintings were just torn apart by the explosion. It's really,
There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work.
And there it's difficult, I think, because it's a historic building. It's more difficult than the museum. They have just applied for support to stabilize the building, and then we have to see what do you do about it if you make a museum out of it, or because until now it was the place where the family still lived. That's still open. The museum is a bit distant from the palace, and it was strange to see, if you go through the building, which parts were hit, which not. Nobody has quite understood how this wave of the explosion
propagated, because
when it went through the building, because in some parts nothing happened, in other parts of the building
it has a lot to do with the construction materials and the way,
it has to do with the building itself. It seems to me that the cases,
foundations,
you might say, the cases of the elevators always were like some kind of chimney,
protected chimney,
where the wave went in and then rushed through. So all the elevators in all the museums I saw were destroyed. The doors pushed out. Some doors of the museum some weren't touched at all. Some were slightly opened. One was really turned 90 degrees and was
Wow.
under the ceiling.
Imagine.
But still, you didn't quite see why this happened or not. It's there, and they are working.
But it's there. The damage is there,
yeah.
and we need
they're
to address.
Yeah, they're quite advanced in the Salzburg Museum.
Okay. Yeah. There was a. By the way, I profit to announce here, and I will also insert the link. There was a webinar by ICOM, organized by, promoted by ICOM, moderated by Hannah Pinnock, about the situation in Lebanon and so on. And so that's also a source for those, all of those interested to go, because it's accessible.
In Beirut, we now hand it over, so to say, to our colleagues in place. Of course, we follow, but it's in the Salzburg Museum. It's Zaina who's working on it, who's very active. And,
I must interview her also. I must
in the Prehistory Museum as well. It's the colleagues working on it. And but we are engaged now in Africa as well, in projects.
Okay, tell us more about, because Africa, from the point of view of UMAC, you know, it's like very, very difficult to penetrate, to have members, although there are universities everywhere, obviously, you know, but it's very, very difficult to penetrate, to have a dialogue and so on. So tell us the recent.
I think when you speak about Africa, you have to keep in mind, I don't know about museums.
I think Peter got frozen, but he will be back in a minute. Peter, are you there?
Does it work?
Yes. No. There was but I will cut this part. It's no problem. So you were talking that in Africa.
No, about Africa. UNESCO had a survey and estimated 95,000 museums in the world, which means 60% more than 8 years before, which is a very
amazing.
Strong growth. But out of these museums, only about 65% are in Europe, of course, Western Europe or North America, and less than 1% in Africa. And this is something we see, of course.
Less than what?
1%, 0.9%.
Oh. Can we, is that a report accessible? Can we?
Yeah, it's published by UNESCO. You can look at it another way around. If there are only 4 countries which have more than 5,000 museums, it's Germany, Japan, Russia, and USA.
And the US.
And 30% of the countries in the world have less than 10 museums. And of course, many of them are African, Madagascar, Zambia, but also Syria, Yemen.
Yeah, of course.
And so there are only a few ICOM members. I think it's less than 1% as well.
Yeah.
And of course, it's difficult to get in contact there if you look for. But there are museums, and we are.
Oh, there are. Oh, there certainly are. And we have members actually. We have members. There are several, especially in South Africa and Nigeria. And there are international committees too. So you have national committees in South Africa. It's a very, very active national committee, by the way. They're doing a wonderful job there.
Yeah. And we launched projects with 5 of these national committees now, because similar maybe it's not similar to Lebanon, but of course there are conflicts going on in African countries. And now with the pandemic, the situation got more difficult for museums regarding security of the collections, of staff as well. Some closed their doors, and the staff, the collections were maybe transported, the staff went elsewhere. And we had a series of 5 projects. One has now been realized, a training project and inventorization project in Burkina Faso. Because there you have an armed conflict. You certainly heard about it.
Yeah.
In some regions, and
So the five national committees are what?
It's Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso.
It's Ivory Coast. It's Cameroon. Mali, and Nigeria. It's Western Africa mostly.
It's Western, yeah.
That's where the conflicts are. Mali, of course, everybody knows. Ivory Coast, Cameroon are maybe less visible, but nevertheless, in Nigeria, you know as well, I think, the conflicts which threaten museums and heritage.
But do you have news from echoes from the damages, actual damages to museums, recent damages to museums in those conflicts? Do you have a channel, those national committees?
We were in contact, of course, to prepare the programs and these programs. And contacted committees there. Of course, you know which countries could be concerned, and we asked them for places where it's necessary to help, and the committees came back to us with proposals. In Cameroon, it was, I think, the western and the northern part of the country where there are conflicts going on with minorities. In Burkina Faso, of course, the frontier to Mali.
Oh yeah, of course.
Where
in the north,
where museums are, and always always have to think, of course, not only museums, it's the population as well, the people living there which are concerned,
of course,
which care about their heritage. I remember from Mali when the conflict was going on there, and ICOM worked with Mali a few years ago. Communities care also about their cultural heritage. So you support the communities.
So they collaborate, you support the communities, and through them, you support the heritage. That's right. And so what kind of plans do we, ICOM has for, you said that Elsa was there recently. So what kind of expectations do you have regarding the support that ICOM can give and so on?
Well, what we can do is, as we did in Lebanon, make connections, because ICOM is not a foundation with 120 million euros.
Of course.
As Alif.
Facilitate, right? To facilitate.
This is something we can do. If there is an urgency that we can create these contacts, we can bring in the experts from our network, which can make, which wasn't necessary, in fact, in Lebanon, because they are the experts.
Because they have an incredible, highly qualified
But in Africa, we offer training programs for the staff to train security staff to develop inventories, digital inventories, because of course they are easier to transfer than physical inventories. And there, of course, the expertise of our network is important, as always.
And look, I was not prepared to say this, but I will tell you immediately that you can count on UMAC and the network of universities and our contacts we have because of the training part, and if necessary, we'll be delighted also to integrate, you know, the consortium, whatever, in order to facilitate. We're part of ICOM, so it's
we always work. We do not do this in the secretariat. We cannot do this. We have staff, but the network is the expertise is out there in the network, and we always ask the specialized committees. We worked with ICOM CC, with
exactly.
the ICMS.
That's the power. That's the power of ICOM, you know, because you have all these, and it's not Paris that really can do anything or whatever. You know, they can promote, they can facilitate, they can engage.
We can create contacts, we can
put people
develop
together.
Programs maybe and organize this. But
but it's really up to the local
local national committee, for example, in this case in Burkina Faso and others, to the local museum or national. To the local museum staff, and then the experts we can maybe bring in.
I think this Lebanon, of course, it's not a case. It's not an example for other countries, as you say, in Africa or in other parts of the world. But at the same time, is really a case study of how ICOM did this, this job of mobilizing and bringing together, the people who have the money, the funders, the expertise,
Yep.
the local expertise, the national committee. I really think that it was
and the international committee in the case of Lebanon, it was UMAC we worked with.
It was UMAC because there were three universities involved in the impact zone. So it was really a nice case study, and I think that maybe it could even be published. I think as an example. Because we have what we have, and then our days are completely overwhelmed with the Zoom meetings and so on, but we forget to think that these experiences should be archived. We are in the business of archiving for the future, right? Including our own practices and our own experiences. So I think that's very important.
Of course, we will report about it to the executive board, to the advisory council, others. So that there will be a report, but we are communicating as well about it.
It's very important that it's
regarding
known.
Beirut, we have to thank UMAC and thank you for the support, because you were in contact.
It was by chance, it was just because there were 3 universities and I knew people in them.
Yeah.
So, but that's precisely the strength of our network, is that everyone knows somebody who knows somebody, and then we all of a sudden we have 40 architects and young people on the terrain, organized by ICOM and ICOM Lebanon and so on. So it's fantastic. It's really, for me, it was an incredible experience. Really, I'm finishing my second mandate now. And I can tell you, this was really one of the most powerful and moving experiences of the strength of people working together remotely and for a common good, for the collective good of a given society.
Well, there is, we speak about the values of ICOM, and there is one value we maybe don't speak enough about. It's solidarity.
Yes.
I think this network relies very much on this mutual support.
Yes, it's true. And there's the fund, the Solidarity Fund. So that's also a very important initiative of ICOM to separate a sum of money to support precisely to demonstrate the solidarity. So that's a very important thing. Okay. So Beirut, Africa, and now COVID. Okay, so you just told me before we started this recorded conversation that you have news about the incredible, comprehensive, very complete survey that ICOM did to museums worldwide. And you have news to share with us. Is that firsthand?
Yeah, it's firsthand, because the report isn't finished yet. We're still working on it, Alessandro and Alexandra and others. But we have the results of the first survey, which took place in September.
Yeah.
I could share the screen if you want to.
Yes, I will. Well, you or me, it doesn't matter. I have it here too. You can do it.
I can try to, wait, there it is. And then go back to Zoom and let's see if it works.
Yeah, we're seeing it. Perfect.
But do you see the?
Yeah, you just have not to do full screen.
Full screen.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just trying. It doesn't work. There it is.
Yeah.
Because the first survey took place in April, May, when the pandemic had already started in China, but arrived in Europe and Latin America, and almost all museums around the world were closed.
Yeah.
There were only very few museums left open. Much of the staff was working remotely because of the lockdowns, which were decreed everywhere. And we speak all the time about the pandemic, but of course the lockdowns had an effect, and they are the consequence of the pandemic, and they have consequences. Whereas in September, it was before the second wave started, so about 50% of the museums were open. In particular in Europe, in Latin America, they had been closed. In some countries,
in different stages, because the different countries were closed in different
stages.
In
every country. It depends on how it's dealt with. It depends on the health system, of course. Europe had 2 waves. The United States has 3 waves. And I think in Latin America is what it was ongoing.
Well, the United States had a permanent wave, a permanent wave, because really, I mean, it's...
And in the first wave, we had asked people, and in the second survey as well, about the situation of the museums and the staff. And in the first and the second survey, people said that they would expect the programs to be reduced by 60%, the activities of museums, and staff maybe by 30%. But this is very different from country to country. We now see, if you ask really for figures, that 14% of the staff have been furloughed or the contract not renewed. So it's first the contractual staff which is affected. But there also you have differences. These figures are
precaire, the ones that have very precarious links with the...
It's precarious. It's also young colleagues.
Education. The education services,
not only,
activities.
Depends on countries. In some countries, it's education. I don't know about Portugal, but in Germany, Austria, for example, in France, it's also conservation staff. In Italy, it's every business, if you want, if I may say, concerned. So
conservation.
We already see the consequences, and we will see the consequences in ICOM, I think, as well. In spring, 13% expected their museum to close. Now it's about 6%, which expect their museum to close permanently. To
close, you mean permanently?
Permanently. The first museum already closed in Europe in Amsterdam. It was the Handbag Museum, a private museum. And it's in particular private museums which are concerned more than publicly funded museums for the time being, which are more resilient because the public funding goes on and there are support, there's even support. Whereas, of course, if you live on the visitors coming through the door, visitors income, use it immediately. And then the number of visitors went down. It's different, of course, from museum to museum in tourist regions and regions without tourism. Big museums, small museums, community museums. The big museums, which are usually tourist museums like the Louvre, so they lost 80% or more of the visitors. Whereas regional museums, maybe 40–50% or even less, and community museums seem less concerned, the small museums. But there we still have to see, I think. We are still looking for the figures.
But this is a point that I think ICOM really needs to be attentive, and I'm sure it is. The closures, because what is going to happen? Of course, the staff and so on, but also to the heritage, to the collection. Sometimes it's listed, it's classé, I don't know, So there's all this cannot be sold. That kind of thing is really worrisome, right? It's
well, we also ask about conservation and security during the lockdowns, and interestingly, in most of the regions, conservation and security were ensured, maintained. There were already security measures before. In those countries where the measures weren't as efficient maybe before, it was a problem, seen as a problem. But in general, it seems that the conservation was less concerned. Of course, again, in cases we just spoke about, Africa, for example, conflict zones. the risk is higher. But it's very much about the activities of museums, because,
of course.
As I said, the programs will be reduced, museums will close, and it's different from region to region and country to country. North America is very much reducing staff now.
Yeah.
Whereas 22% of the respondents in the Arab region expect their museums to be closed permanently. And in Asia, the rates are higher as well. But of course, when the museum is closed, it loses contact with the communities, which is, of course, a concern. It's not only about funding and finances, but also about your community, your public, your environment. Let's say, the museum.
Yes, your social commitment, and
And there, of course, museums started to try to catch up and to cope with the new situation, and especially in online activities, a lot of increase was seen, and museums really innovated in this sector. In particular, social media. We saw a rise of 50% of the activities in social media in museums. The platforms, Facebook and others, Instagram, Twitter, but also all these online access to collections and learning programs were digitized as well. Overall, worldwide by 20%, with differences with a focus on learning programs, in particular in the United States or North America, let's say. Learning programs were digitized. In Asia, the events were digitized much more, and in Europe it was much the online access to collections, which was digitized. Collection databases were made accessible.
Were made accessible
so that people can see what's in there and follow the activities of the museums. Of course, live events you had everywhere. Everybody started to organize live events, which were then transmitted online, as we do here.
Exactly.
And
we all had to adapt, right?
But the point is, of course, these services are for free, and on the one hand, museums lose income because there are no visitors. On the other hand, you develop new services.
They have to spend, new services.
And there is still...
And in some countries, I imagine that the network, the quality in some Asian countries, some African countries, the quality of the access, although everyone has, Facebook and so on, but, to participate in a webinar and so on, you need kind of a stable. So it's not, it's a reason. The online thing can be a factor of exclusion and a factor of inaccess and inequality.
It is for sure in Africa. We had a series of webinars now, and African participants, for example, recently on online activities, Louisa from Nigeria told us, and before that, Christian from Cameroon as well, that in another webinar that you don't have internet access, of course, as you have it in Europe or North America or Asia.
And also South America, South America also is not widely accessible as it is. So, and that's a problem. So we really have to, I don't know, ICOM as a lobbying body, to kind of, I don't know how this can be solved. But
well, we also tried, ICOM started a whole range of activities. The Secretariat in spring, when the pandemic started, we started to publish recommendations regarding conservation and security, for example, with ICOM-CC and others. We started to publish tools for advocacy, because it's certainly important now to advocate for museums, to show the value, not only the social, the value of the collection, also the social value of museums.
Exactly.
The local value. We worked on this a while ago with the OECD, for example, when we worked on the guide for local development. And these things we can, of course, refer to now. And then we started a series of webinars to look into future strategies, because this is something, of course, which is now developing. I think this will go through a discussion with our network, with experts from our network. And we had the webinars now on online activities, on the reopenings. And you see, I found it interesting when we asked now about the reopenings, that there is quite a solid structure now, security measures, which are applied in almost all the museums we spoke to, which means distancing, masks, sanitization. I think 90% of the museums which reopened applied all these, implemented these measures. It's maybe less evident yet for online activities, or in particular, I think for jobs. We will have a webinar on employment.
So tell us more about, so that people can, so what are the next webinars? So there's one on Wednesday, 18, one on Wednesday,
one is on
November.
Wednesday 18.
About,
wait, I have to stop share the screen. There is one on
November 18th. When we broadcast
November
this,
18,
it will have passed, so people
it's on employment, stimulating employment in the museum sector. There was one about
Beirut, precisely.
Beirut,
where
with the RMC and others about emergency management, and Lebanon as an example. We had the webinar on digital transformation, online activities, in October. And we will continue the series for sure next year. We will develop more. I must say we're thinking about the next topics. I think one topic could be, we certainly still have to think about business models. We already had a webinar with OECD. We will have more webinars with OECD next year in this direction. Of course, as an economic organization, intergovernmental organization, they're a partner for this. And they bring in this different perspective, which is important, I think, as well. Another thing I think we have to look into is management and leadership. How do you run a museum under these circumstances? I spoke to quite many.
Team building, with everyone dispersed, this is very important.
I spoke to many presidents of ICOM committees in the last months, and some of them are directors, and I think
it's very difficult.
It's more or less the same experience everywhere. It's remote working, communicating with your team only through Zoom or others, and not meeting in person. You cannot just pass and ask a question and then you get the result. It's very different.
WhatsApp groups, the largest tool, the largest increase tool in museum work nowadays is WhatsApp groups. There's WhatsApp groups for everything.
And still, it's not the same. It's not like in meeting in person and like being in an office. It's the same for the ICOM Secretariat. We are preparing the new offices. We are moving to the new offices these days. I think it's very good. We brought the team together in one place, and
but you're in lockdown in Paris. So
we're locked down,
and
we cannot benefit from it. Not yet.
No, not yet.
Well, next year, I'm sure, when elections are there and we can return. But it's still, if you are director of a museum, which in fact quite some of the presidents of ICOM committees are. Running the museum, working with a team, it's a challenge, and I think we need some more answers, not only regarding business, also regarding management. I think in this direction we will have some webinars as well. We will need some webinars, I think.
And also the question of the reaching the community. I think it should continue because it continues to concern museums, you know, how to reach communities, ongoing projects that were discontinued, and so on, how you can really be meaningful online, which is kind of tricky.
This is a topic on our list. We had recommendations,
it's kind of online,
guidelines.
It's kind of ongoing topic. It's a constant. It's going to be a constant.
All these topics were there before.
Yeah.
Let's say, but they got a different meaning, not only online activities, of course, because
a different urgency. They got a different urgency, you know. You were kind of, okay, yeah, we are online, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're on whatever, but it was not really it didn't have the centrality that it was forced to have.
Now it's a necessity.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Peter, it's been almost 1 hour of conversation, you know. We were supposed to have, but it's been amazing. Time did not pass, and we learned so much from not only your experience, but also from Beirut and the ICOM, you know, recent activities in Africa, and how ICOM has been providing help and guidance to museum professionals all over the world through the guidelines, the recommendations, and also the webinars. We will list everything below because they are of interest to university museums too. And thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
And see you soon, hopefully.
In person, I hope.
That's it. In Prague.
Yeah.
We hope in Prague.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.